All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Thank you, everyone. I'll tell you that the Wednesday recorded audience is my favorite, and it is just a wonderful day to take stock of some of the things that we said yesterday that have indeed come to pass, and we'll review some of them for you in a moment. John Rothmann joins us today. The professor will be in about a half hour. Kim is here. Always a good day when Kim is part of the mix, and Tony is part of the mix as well. Yeah. Woo! Tony is working OT today. He's usually a Monday, Tuesday guy. Today he's rocking a Wednesday. And there's a bounce in his step. What can you say, right, Tony? You really, yeah. There's always. Yep. He always brings it. Yeah.
Totally. Every day.
I sat next. I had a late night. Played some poker. And sat next to a guy who I thought, I kind of recognize this guy. And I said, hey, he says, oh yeah, we played before. He said, you may not recognize me. And I'm thinking, yeah, I kind of recognize you. He said, I kind of have a different look. I said, well, really? Well, like, he said, well, first of all, I shaved my beard. And secondly, I've lost 290 pounds.
Oh, my God.
That is
it's been a while
insane.
Since you've seen him.
I mean, he must have been immense. So 290 pounds. So I said, and now he looks, like, he never had a weight issue.
Right.
And he said that he did it with that Ozempic stuff.
Wow.
Okay, so he's taking Ozempic. And so I said, well, I've heard it can be expensive. He said, no. He said, I got it through Kaiser. He said, I don't know, the whole thing cost me like $190, $150. Like, wow. So all the boys and girls out there who watch this show, I mean, this guy lost almost 300 pounds on this stuff. And he said his mother, now, by the way, this guy's 70, okay? And that's important because he told me his mother, who's still alive, was like overjoyed that he not lost the weight, shaved the beard.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like a mom.
She said, well, you look great, honey, but the beard, we have to shave it. And sure enough, for her birthday, he shaved the beard. Anyway, that was my night, and I hope you had a pleasant night as well. We have been preparing quite the show for you. Yes, we will talk about the RFK Jr. Confirmation hearings. In fact, we have some pieces of that I think you'll find interesting. We'll talk about the Milley targeting, which is clearly an act of vengeance. And, I mean, Trump advertised vengeance. And I believe that much of his crew, the MAGA crew, they delight in vengeance. They delight in vengeance against the libs, owning the libs, whatever, or anyone who isn't even a lib, like a John Bolton type, who goes on mainstream media or any kind of media outlet generally and speaks anything that is in the least bit disparaging about the king. And so the Boltons of the world, the Milleys of the world, who was obviously Mark Esper, the DOD chief, who pushed back on Trump when it came to using troops to essentially round up and actually fire on, it was suggested, BLM protesters. All these people fall into the enemy category now. And so they're dealt with harshly. And so the lifting of security details from Bolton, from Milley, Esper might be included in that as well. I mean, all of these things are just the beginning. And we'll get to the Milley situation in just a moment. Before I do, Kim, anything that I need to pay particular attention to? I think we wanted to, didn't you mention the water thing?
Oh,
the water
yes.
in California?
Yes.
Let us just tie this up. because, as you know, those of you who are not in California, we were born of a radio show in San Francisco, California. Then that radio station went away, and we've taken the show to YouTube, and it also goes out on the audio platforms across the board as a podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, etc. So because we're born in California, because we're still in California, this is a live show, 11 to 1 on the West Coast, 2 to 4 on the East Coast, we try to at least keep track of those things that are important to Californians. Some of these stories are so big emerging from California that we share them with you, and you're already aware of them. I mean, for example, the fires in the Palisades and the Eaton Fire in Altadena, et cetera, these Southern California fires, these are massive and a huge national story. So one of the things that has happened is Donald Trump has weighed in on the use of water in California, something which I think he's been misinformed about or clueless on. And so he has been stating something that has been, well, fundamentally incorrect. Tony, do you have the post? Here was his post. The United States military just entered the great state of California and, under emergency powers, in capital letters, turned on the water flowing abundantly from the Pacific Northwest and beyond. The days of putting a fake environmental argument over the people, in capital letters, are over, in capital letters. Enjoy the water, California, 3 exclamation points.
Wow.
Now, what's the truth of that, Kim?
The truth is there's no spigot in the sky, and we don't have a giant faucet that we control and turn on and off. We have a dam that we allow and can control the flow of water to the Central Valley farmers, and that may be what they're talking about, but it doesn't go to Southern California, and it had nothing to do with the wildfires.
It also has nothing to do with the Pacific Northwest. I mean, he's got this thing that there's somehow kind of a pipe flowing from the Pacific Northwest where there's abundant water. And by the way, there isn't always abundant water in the Pacific Northwest. They've had drought conditions within the last decade, substantial drought conditions as well. In any case, I mean, years of drought. So it was corrected. It was corrected, though, by the state of California. The California Department of Water Resources posted this. The military did not enter California. The federal government restarted federal water pumps after they were offline for maintenance for 3 days. State water supplies in Southern California remain plentiful.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I mean, far be it from, the Trump administration to tell the truth. It's like a total alternative fact situation. And so yesterday, the new press secretary was asked about the pumps in California.
Yes, the new press secretary. There she is. Kim, you know she's not even 30 years old. It's always exciting when a young person has ascended to a very important role within the new administration. Can you tell us anything more about her? I mean,
I can tell you some things about her.
What is her name, please,
Her
Kim?
name is Caroline Leavitt, and she's 27. She's the youngest press secretary ever.
Wow.
She wears her cross like a badge, so we could see that.
All right.
She was a Fox News intern.
Sure she was.
Surprise. She's the former spokesperson for, what's her name? Elise Stefanik. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
I see. So she's been a spokesperson before.
She's done this before. Yeah, there she is. She, in high school, she was starting her journalism career, and her op-eds in the school newspaper included a defense of Trump's travel ban. A critique of the news media. So
she distinguished herself early, everybody, as a defender of the travel ban.
Yeah.
Well, we wish her well. She handles the questions with typical kind of confidence and unflagging forward movement on all issues. How did she handle this question of California water? Tony, roll it, please.
Hey, Caroline. On California, could you please clarify what the military did with the water last night as referenced in the president's Truth Social post?
The water has been turned back on in California, and this comes just days after President Trump.
Why LA women?
Yeah, I guess that's the
why LA women
ad.
aren't going to the gym.
That's the ad.
In Pacific Palisades, and as you all saw, applied tremendous pressure on state and local officials in Pacific Palisades, including Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, to turn on the water and to direct that water to places in the south and in the middle of the state that have been incredibly dry, which has led to the expansion, the rapid expansion of these fires.
So could you clarify what the military's role was, where the water came from, and how it got there?
Again, the Army Corps of Engineers has been on the ground in California to respond to the devastation from these wildfires. And I would point out that just days after President Trump visited the devastation from these fires, the water was turned on. That is because of the pressure campaign he put on state and local officials there who clearly lack all common sense. And I will never forget being at that roundtable with the president last week and hearing the frustration in the voices of Pacific Palisades residents who feel as though their government has just gone insane. Before President
Okay, this is now she's just riffing, but I do think that there is frustration on the part of Southern Californians in many communities, Pacific Palisades among them, and those are specific frustrations, not related though to water supply. I mean, again, we've discussed it. I'm not going to go over it again. We put out shorts on it. I set the record straight at the time as to the reasons that hydrants ran dry, et cetera, and how these wildfires are fought in a different way than from the hydrants and the pumper trucks. And in the initial 24 hours of these massive conflagrations, they were being driven by 80-mile-an-hour winds, even winds in excess of that at sea level. And there is no fighting a fire with any kind of hose. I don't care what kind of pressure is coming out of it, out of a hydrant, when you have winds of that velocity. Again, we've already covered that. So, quickly, I want to recognize Sally and Callie, 2025, with a super chat. Happy Lunar New Year, Year of the Snake. I didn't realize it was the Year of the Snake.
That's fitting.
Is it a... yes, it is the Year of the Snake, apparently. Is it a coincidence that we also have a snake in the White House? I see what you did. Yes. I see what you did, Sally and Callie. Thank you very much. Chaplain Fred, who was actually so impressive in a burst of super chats a couple of weeks ago that I actually got emails saying, book Chaplain Fred as a guest. Chaplain Fred is back. 1999 super chat, he says, hi, Mark and Kim. Did you see how Newsom spoke to Trump when he got off the plane? Firm shake of the hand, and the body language spoke volumes.
Yep.
It was priceless. Yes, I think it is true that he did have sort of the strength of a firm handshake, and he spoke to it. Now, again, as I cautioned yesterday, I wouldn't read too much into body language and who was leaning forward and, wow, they look like an umpire arguing a call with a player. I mean, it's without a hearing what was said, it's a little hard to say. But to your point, Chaplain Fred, I do think Newsom plays Trump as well as one can play them when they are likely going to end up as adversaries, meaning it's a blue state and Trump is hating on blue states, et cetera, by doing what you're talking about, which is representing a certain strength and also a charm. I mean, Gavin Newsom is a politician through and through,
Yep.
and he does know how to turn on the charm. And Trump responds to that. And to be fair to Trump, and I know that's something that my audience sometimes pushes back on me about, but Trump is charming. Trump is charismatic. Both guys are very powerful political figures. I mean, again, I think Trump is vapid, vacuous, dangerous, reckless, and all these other things. But
Lawless.
But Trump is a generational political figure. Believe it. It's true. He is, it's all a con. He'll say whatever, but he's figured out what to say and how to say it over and over and over again, even if it's not true, which for the most part it isn't. But he is a remarkable political figure. And for that reason, he's very dangerous. But when those two guys got together on the tarmac, Newsom and Trump, I think you saw two very skilled politicians, if you will. And I'm hoping that we get the relief we desperately need. I mean, that federal support should be here, and we paid for it, and we should get it. So, hoping that it will happen. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
The other thing that's happening today is the confirmation hearing of RFK Jr. I'm going to get to other stuff too, and we've got John Rothmann. We'll wade into the pool of illegality that's coming out of the federal government right now. I mean, I just mentioned to you, and I told you this yesterday, but this whole thing where you're putting a freeze on various government programs that have already been allocated funds from Congress, you just can't do that. I mean, that's patently illegal. It's a violation of federal law, as we said yesterday, and it is way, way, way in like the deep space. Now, that freeze has been rolled back, hasn't it, Kim? I mean, as of this moment, it just broke in the last hour or so.
So according to our friend Caroline Leavitt, she says no. She says it's not being rescinded, just the memo that announced it is being rescinded. But that what they're saying is that the federal freeze aid funding remains in full effect, that they just rescinded the memo that they had issued about the freeze. That Leavitt said it's simply a rescission of the OMB memo to end any confusion created by the court's injunction. So,
well, I don't know how you rescind a memo without
rescinding the policy. Yeah,
the essence of the memo and the policy
right.
associated with the memo and articulated in the memo. So I think they are rescinding it. But all right, but we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a whole lot of
is that because
Orwellian stuff going on?
If you say you rescinded it, does it look like you lost this round? So we're going to say, oh, we didn't rescind it. We just took back the memo. So it looks less like you lost the battle.
Well, I'll tell you something. You've kind of inadvertently mentioned something that I think is worth noting. They do really, and we should also take stock of the news cycle. Have you won the news cycle? Like sometimes with an announcement, you kind of win the news cycle. That's what they're trying to do with the immigration roundups, right? We talked about this before. We said it at the time. Here's what they'll do. There's no way they can deport 11 million people. There isn't the money. There isn't the infrastructure. They're going to wrap up a bunch of illegals. They're going to do it in very high-profile ways. They're going to contact local news, and they're going to embed celebrities like Dr. Phil to get the word out and to get attention around these deportations. And in the end, they're not going to deport any more people than were deported under Obama or under Biden. I mean, I suspect that's the way it's going to go down. Already, the deportations are having it's the announcements of the deportations that are having a positive effect in terms of the way they're viewed by the country that has rallied behind wanting these deportations, right? That's one of the things that brought Trump into the White House. But the other thing is it's having a dramatic effect and repercussions on the agricultural community and all the communities we've talked about that depend on a lot of that labor force. So, but it's the news cycle that you talk about. So when it comes to the freeze, it may be a push. You know, you had the freeze on funding, but then it was a realization that, oh my God, A, we can't do that. B, we're affecting Meals on Wheels, and we're affecting SNAP programs. We're affecting a whole bunch of people who we didn't mean to affect, or it might actually involve political blowback on us. So let's rescind the memo. Let's make up some wording about, well, we're rescinding the memo, but the essence of what the memo said is something we're really going to go through with. The whole thing's illegal. You cannot do it. Cannot. Congress has already allocated that money, and you as President of the United States have no power to stop that spend. So there are a lot of ways you can hide money and move money, and I'm sure Trump and his henchmen will find all of them. But one of the ways isn't to issue some memo about a freeze. Now, I want to get to, I'll get to the Milley stuff, and I'll get to with Rothmann a bit. Mm-hmm. But I did want to quickly get to RFK Jr. Can we? Because this is a controversial pick that is spoken of as one of the picks that he may not be able to get through. So Trump has been quite successful in getting, well, I think if you get Hegseth through, you can get anybody through. I mean, you know, Hegseth is he's a drunk sexual assaulter who is not even remotely qualified to run the Pentagon. He's not remotely qualified to, you know, manage a kid's birthday party. And yet he's going to be running the Department of Defense. He got through because Trump leaned on Joni Ernst and these other senators who likely were worried that they were going to get primaried if they didn't support Hegseth. And so he was confirmed. Once that happens, it makes me think that maybe he can get anybody through. But RFK Jr. could be a reach. So now let me...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I want to quickly get to the RFK Jr. confirmation, which is riddled with political headwinds. Most of them come from the Democrats. I was watching a lot of it this morning. And the thing about the Republicans is that they do fall in line, and there is sort of a back rub quality to the Republican questioning, and through the confirmation process, the Democratic questioning really brings up those things that could be an issue even for some GOP senators. What's first, Tony? I forget what I had up first for you. This is his cousin, Caroline Kennedy, talking about RFK Jr., and it ain't for nothing that she is very intensely against him being part of this Trump administration. Go ahead, please.
I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator. He's always been charismatic, able to attract others through the strength of his personality, his willingness to take risks and break the rules. I watch his younger brothers and cousins follow him down the path of drug addiction. His basement, his garage, his dorm room were always the center of the action, where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in a blender to feed to his hawks. It was often a perverse scene of despair and violence. Today, while he may encourage a younger generation to attend AA meetings, Bobby is addicted to attention and power. Bobby preys on the desperation of parents of sick children, vaccinating his own kids while building a following hypocritically discouraging other parents from vaccinating theirs. It's incomprehensible to me that someone who is willing to exploit their own painful family tragedies for publicity would be put in charge of America's life and death situations.
So that's a portion of what her video was, and it's quite impressive. It was and is something worth seeing. That's why we share a little bit of it with you.
You don't hear from her very often. She's very private. You know, I know she goes to charity events and things, but you don't hear her speak out like this. So she must have been incredibly inspired or horrified, you could say, to have to come out and make that statement.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she risks a lot of reputational harm to herself. I mean, again, the Trump world is populated with those who are ready to exact vengeance on his behalf. Now to the hearings. What was our first video on the hearings, Tony? I'm forgetting. Yeah. Bennett from Colorado really runs down quickly the kind of laundry list of questions that may surround a bit of the RFK Jr. appointment. Go ahead, please, Tony.
Did you say that COVID-19 was a genetically engineered bioweapon that targets black and white people, but spared Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people?
I didn't say it was deliberately targeted. I just quoted an NIH-funded and NIH published study.
Did you say that it targets black and white people, but spared Ashkenazi Jews?
I quoted a study, Your Honor. I quoted an NIH study that showed that
I'll take that as a
certain
yes.
races
I have to move on, I have to move on. Did you say that Lyme disease is highly likely a materially engineered bioweapon? I made sure I put in the highly likely. Did you say Lyme disease is a highly likely militarily engineered bioweapon?
I probably did say that.
Did you say that?
And that's what the developer of
I
Lyme
want all
disease
of our
said.
colleagues to hear it, Mr. Kennedy. I want them to hear it. You said yes. Did you say that exposure to pesticides causes children to become transgender?
No, I never said that.
Okay, I have the record that I'll give to the chairman, and he can make his judgment about what you said. Did you write in your book, and it's undeniable, that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS? Yes or no, Mr. Kennedy?
I'm not sure if I made that.
Okay, I'll give it to the chairman, Mr. Kennedy. And my final question, did you say on a podcast, and I quote, "I wouldn't leave abortion to the states. My belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have the government involved, even if it's full term." Did you say that, Mr. Kennedy?
Senator, I believe that every abortion is a tragedy.
Did you say it, Mr. Kennedy? This
believe-
matters. It doesn't matter what you come here and say that isn't true, that's not reflective of what you really believe, that you haven't said over decade after decade after decade, because unlike other jobs we're confirming around this place, this is a job where it is life and death for the kids that I used to work for in the Denver public schools and for families all over this country that are suffering from living in the richest country of the world that can't deliver basic health care and basic mental health care to them. It's too important for the games that you're playing, Mr. Kennedy.
That's good, Tony. Thank you. I like that list because it covers both infectious disease, and then he gets to the abortion question, which could, again, involve some political headwinds for him with GOP senators. Now to two people who I think are outstanding politicians in this media environment, and I've talked to you about them before because I feel as though the Democrats need to find a way to communicate effectively. They need people who are good on television, who are good in social media particularly. They need Bernie Sanders type people, and Bernie Sanders was one of those who was questioning RFK Jr. today. We have that, Tony, if you would, please.
Okay. I'm going to pick up on a point that Senator Hassan made. Look, there is no question that abortion is a divisive issue in this country. I would say a majority of the people are pro-choice. There's a strong minority who are pro-life. A year and a half ago, you went to New Hampshire, running for president, gave a speech, and you talked about government should not tell a woman what she can do with her own body. That's her choice. Now, I think everybody on that side is pro-life. I think everybody here is pro-choice. I have never seen any major politician flip on that issue quite as quickly as you did when Trump asked you to become HHS secretary. Tell me why you think people should have confidence in your consistency and in your word when you really made a major U-turn on an issue of that importance in such a short time.
Senator, I believe, and I've always believed, that every abortion is a tragedy.
But you told the people in New Hampshire that it was their right. All right, let me do a last question here because I'm running out of time. I think the gist of what you're trying to say today is you're really pro-vaccine, you want to ask questions. You have started a group called the Children's Health Defense. You're the originator. Right now, as I understand it, on their website, they are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unvaxxed, Unafraid. Next one, and they're sold for $26 a piece, by the way. Next one is No Vax, No Problem. Now, you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines. Can you tell us now that you will, now that you are pro-vaccine, that you're going to have your organization take these products off the market?
Senator, I have no power over that organization. I'm not part of it. I resigned from the board.
Yeah, that was just a few months ago. You founded that You certainly have power. You can make that call. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with
Are you
leadership.
supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
I am supportive of vaccines. I will. I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that product. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that is. I thought that was good. I mean, because even in the general sense, you understand these are senators who are bringing up his history, recent history, when it comes to these issues involving vaccines and infectious disease. And finally, about money. Elizabeth Warren, who I felt would have been terrific in the Oval Office, she created the Office of Consumer Affairs and Consumer Protections that has been dismantled by this administration. But she, I think, is a real advocate for the people. And again, she speaks in a way that across the fence style, if you will, gets the message through. Here she is talking about the money that RFK Jr. gets from this whole world of anti-vax and lawsuits, etc. Go ahead, please, Tony.
Count here of how, as Secretary of HHS, if you get confirmed, you could influence every one of those lawsuits. Well, let me start the list.
These
you
are
can
lawsuits he has
publish
out
your anti-vaccine conspiracies, but this
Vaccine
time
lawsuits.
on U.S. government letterhead, something a jury might be impressed by. You could appoint
I
people
don't
to the
understand that.
CDC vaccine panel who share your anti-vax views and let them do your dirty work. You could tell the CDC vaccine panel to remove a particular vaccine from the vaccine schedule. You could remove vaccines from special compensation programs, which would open up manufacturers to mass torts. You could make more injuries eligible for compensation, even if there is no causal evidence. You could change vaccine court processes to make it easier to bring junk lawsuits. You could turn over FDA data to your friends at the law firm, and they could use it however it benefited them. You could change vaccine labeling. You could change vaccine information rules. You could change which claims are compensated in the vaccine injury compensation program. There's a lot of ways that you can influence those future lawsuits and pending lawsuits while you are Secretary of HHS. And I'm asking you to commit right now that you will not take a financial stake in every one of those lawsuits so that what you do as Secretary will also benefit you financially down the line.
I'll comply with all the ethical guidelines.
That's not the question. You and I, you have said
You're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue vaccine pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Look, no one should be fooled here. As Secretary of HHS, Robert Kennedy will have the power to undercut vaccines and vaccine manufacturing across our country. And for all of his talk about follow the science and his promise that he won't interfere with those of us who want to vaccinate his kids, the bottom line is the same. Kennedy can kill off access to vaccines and make millions of dollars while he does it. Kids might die, but Robert Kennedy can keep cashing in.
Senator, I support vaccines. I support the childhood schedule. I will do that. The only thing I want is good science, and that's it.
How about then say you won't make money off what you do as Secretary of HHS?
Before we go to...
So there you go. I mean, he wouldn't pledge that. So if you care about the money part of it, there's the money part of it as well. It is true that somebody who is always playing the room reminds me a lot of the boss, Donald Trump, saying one thing to the room and then saying another thing to another room. But in the case of RFK Jr., he's really written on this. He's written books on it and all the rest. It may be very hard to shake that history. That's the latest on the RFK Jr. confirmation process. I see all the chat. Karen Cooper says lies, 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 lies. John Watson says all these guys promise things while they're sitting there in the hot seat, but as soon as they're sworn in, they do a 180. Of course, that's true. We've seen perhaps the highest profile example of that with the Supreme Court. And indeed, these are multiple versions of it as we continue to see these confirmation processes. How many of Trump's nominees have so far not been confirmed, says Nellafidi. And again, I predicted they would all get through. And that was during the time when, Gates never made it to even the confirmation process. And now that I've seen Hegseth get through, I really feel as though that now it's all going to be close. And because RFK Jr. comes from the Democratic side of the aisle, maybe it'll be tougher. We'll ask John Rothmann. Tulsi Gabbard is also the tough one, but Patel is maybe just as dangerous. These are, I think, incompetent at best, but I'd suggest they are dangerous, incompetent appointments almost completely across the board, with just some notable exceptions. So, we continue.
Do you feel it? It's the Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
I do want to bring on the professor. You can take this moment as we bring on the professor to smash the like button like a boss. It does help us in the world of YouTube. And if you're just passing through, please subscribe to the show. We're a free show, obviously, and we are live every day for 2 hours between 2 and 4 in the East and 11 to 1 in the West. This guy, our former colleague at KGO Radio, he's a presidential historian, brilliant analyst when it comes to so many things going on in politics. How about it for John Rothmann?
I love those modest introductions, Mark. Thank you.
You are the real thing, sir. And of course, you have a podcast of your own, which will give you a lot of oxygen on at the end of this conversation. I like to kind of road test you before I give you all the big wet kisses at the end to make sure you really hit the ball with utter performance levels that we've come to expect before I give you the plugs. Now, I do want to first get to something that happened and made big waves in Washington, but it strikes me that it is utterly illegal. I mean, a violation of federal law. And that's this freeze on monies coming from the federal government. The memo goes out, and it goes out from, again, the author of Project 2025, one of the prominent authors, is running OMB, right? Office of Management and Budget. And the memo comes out with the freeze on spending. Can you speak to, I'll get to a couple other illegal things, but let's start with that one. Can you speak to what this was about and its legality or illegality?
Let me start with a question of legality. Of course, it's illegal. This president has done a series of things that are illegal, including the dismissal of inspectors general and the fact that you had to give notice to Congress 30 days. This is a president who is lawless. He has no regard for laws or constitutions. And I must tell you, it's very upsetting. To be blunt with you, if the Democrats controlled the Senate, I think he would have to be more restrained. But because there is no break on his abuse of power, I have to tell you, I had a conversation with someone I'm very close to, and I talked about this and said, well, that's the president's prerogative. I said, no. Take a look at the case of Archibald Cox. And the response was, who was Archibald Cox?
No, just to be clear, you're talking about the dismissal of the inspectors general when you're saying
yes, but I'm talking about under Nixon, it was the special counsel.
Right,
There are the same restraints, the same questions were raised. When Archibald Cox was fired, there were immediately resolutions of impeachment introduced into the House of Representatives. Frankly, what Donald Trump has done is absolutely wrong. It's unconstitutional. It's an abuse of power. And there's no way around it. And history will judge him harshly. Now, let me, in his defense, say that he is doing this because he wants a test. He wants this to go to the United States Supreme Court.
Exactly.
And he believes that if it goes to the court, even though he knows it's unconstitutional, that he will have a chance of winning. Somebody asked me, what about established law? Roe v. Wade was established law. The whole point is if you have a majority on the court, then law doesn't mean very much. And that's the problem.
This is a terrific point that John is making because essentially we know the executive has granted a lot of power from the Supreme Court, the immunity that we never really necessarily anticipated he'd be getting from the Supreme Court and for all official acts. And the idea that he'd be looking to sort of build out that executive power, John's saying, is an interesting strategy because he knows or wants this to go up to the Supreme Court, kind of road testing that, right, John? He wants to see how much power he indeed has. Yeah.
He believes that just as the Supreme Court granted presidential immunity, that it will grant him more power. And may I say, it's very disturbing. I've had discussions with people about this who don't get it, who don't understand. That's what checks and balances are all about. And let me also quickly point out, because you were talking about Bobby Kennedy Jr., how obscene that he would be Secretary of Health and Human Services. I've interviewed him. I think you've interviewed him. We know where he stands on these issues. And the fact that he would be in charge of Health and Human Services is appalling. And what can I tell you? Let me quickly, because I know you want to talk about Milley and Pompeo and Bolton. If any one of them is hurt in any way, who will be responsible? It'll be Donald Trump, because he's the one who has suspended their protection. Let me be clear. Before the election, I had a huge argument, and I think we talked about it, with a very close friend of mine who told me, oh, no, he's not out for revenge. No, Donald Trump is just saying it's just rhetoric. It isn't rhetoric. It's true. He is out for revenge, and this revenge has enormous implications.
Well, the conversation you had with your friend about he's not really going to do that is instructive, because I think a lot of Americans felt that way. Like, he's not really, he's a smack talker. He's not going to really do this. But yes, indeed, he is. Look, I thought, and I made the point on the show repeatedly, that he would be quite recriminatory and his general stance would be about vengeance, because we saw what he did to Vindman. Vindman, who testified at the impeachment hearing about the Ukraine call. He has a track record that's very much about vengeance. It's not about smack talking and ignoring it. It's about smack talking and following through on it. So,
yeah, and by the way, if you listen to Stephen Miller's interview on CNN yesterday, it was a unbelievable demonstration of the arrogance of power. He essentially said, we don't care what Congress says. We care about the Constitution as we interpret it. And that goes to the whole question of impounding money.
Right. So the impounding money, the impound is essentially the stopping of the federal payments. And as I was saying, I mean, it's just a violation of law. Congress has already allocated these funds. You as president have no power to stop it. Isn't that correct?
So may I ask you the question? I ask the audience the question. When a president violates the law, when the president violates the Constitution, how do you check the president's power? And the answer is, that's the job of Congress. But the Republicans in the United States Senate are so afraid of Donald Trump, who again threatened to primary people. He again threatened it just the other day, that there is no check or balance. And may I say, you and I talked about this before. What will bring Donald Trump down? His hubris, the arrogance of power. And that's what you're seeing now. The question is, when will the Republicans wake up to the arrogance of power and decide enough is enough, which is what they did with Richard Nixon. So there is a precedent here. There is a history here. There is a sense here, which frankly concerns me greatly. Anyway, that's my view on it.
Well, I think that the idea somehow that the Republicans are going to wake up, we've been waiting for that wake-up call for, 15 years. I just don't think a Republican Party that is so cowed by Trump because they're worried about his power. He does have a kind of unbridled power right now. He has the populace, enough of them on his side. He has an armed militia now. I don't mean to overstate it. You can say, oh, come on, Mark. It's not that. I mean, these guys, the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and white nationalists and Christo-fascists who came to the J6 situation and riot at the Capitol armed and ready to provoke mayhem, tried to beat these officers to death, to pardon them is beyond the pale.
Are you aware that the Justice Department is erasing the record of those concerns on presidential order? And can you imagine if Pam Bondi is Attorney General of the United States of America? I mean, this is unconscionable.
Deborah says, in Nixon's time, John, the U.S. Senate voted independently, both parties, issue by issue, senator by senator. That's kind of true. It's more true than perhaps the kind of, look, the old line, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. I mean, they've been in line and have voted as a bloc for a pretty long time, haven't they, John?
Well, I would say in the Trump years, yes. We saw vigorous dissent in previous administrations.
So you're saying that she's right. During the Nixon
Yes.
administration, you
Yes.
did have senator by senator.
And you have to
Okay.
understand, the Democrats controlled the House and Senate during the Nixon years. So there was not unbridled power. There was a check on presidential power. But what concerns me, and you alluded to this earlier, is the denial by the Trump people and by Donald Trump himself that they were following the January 25th Project recommendations. And of course, 20 plus January of those people on the January 25th Project are now officials in the government of the United States.
No,
I told you, the
OMB head, he's pivotal. You know, OMB covers money. It's such a low profile job, but John can tell you that Office of Management and Budget, it's all the money gets through there, and essentially it's a clearinghouse for so many of the federal funds that are devoted to
tremendous power.
Yes, tremendous power. And as you say, he was a Project 2025 guy. So there has been a rescinding of that order, of that freeze temporarily, the one that we both agree is illegal.
That was because of a court in Washington, D.C. And let me remind you, that judge was a Biden nominee, and the Trump people are determined to get around it. They're going to do everything they can to do that.
And it's interesting that their first week has been punctuated by a relentless reference to Biden and the Biden administration. I mean, if you watch that White House press conference, it was just replete with examples of the failed Biden administration and the failed policies of the Biden administration. Almost every question defaulted to that. That wasn't an accident. That is an expressed media strategy, and it may be effective over time.
No, you're precisely right. It is exactly what they want to do. Joe Biden is the whipping boy, and they're going to continue to use that whip as frequently as they can in order to convince people that they are in the right. 100%. 100%.
So as you see all of this coming from the White House, there's one other thing I wanted to visit, and it is true absurdity. And once again, it is utterly without any kind of legal underpinning, and I wanted to weigh in on it with you. It's this buyout that they are offering federal workers.
And there is no guarantee in the buyout.
So federal workers are offered buyouts with about 8 months' pay. This is an idea, I think, born of the tech bros who really inform so much of the narrative around Trump, particularly Elon Musk. This is what they do in tech all the time. Now, buyouts are offered across the board in different environments, work environments. But I guess I'm saying it's very much part of the world of tech. So to me, the trail of breadcrumbs leads back to Musk. But wherever it leads back, it doesn't really matter. They are announcing and did announce that they're offering buyouts to all federal employees who opt to leave their jobs by next week. This would slim down the U.S. government, and maybe you feel like, hey, the U.S. government should be slimmed down, but this is a wild way across the board to somehow offer people an exit that is not guaranteed, as John says, by any money that's been allocated. This is completely invented. It's a one-dimensional...
It's like the Department of Government Efficiency. There is no such thing as the Department of Government Efficiency.
So, Tony, do you have the... we have the memo?
There you have it.
Yeah. So this is the memo that went out with the offer, so you can see it. It says, during the first week of the return to the office, substantial... so the reformed federal workhouse will build its... That's kind of a philosophy statement, but they talk about standards of conduct, of performance culture, return to the office. They want everybody back since working remotely with COVID. But now you get to the offer. If you choose to remain in your current position, we thank you for your renewed focus on serving the American people to the best of your abilities, blah, blah, blah. But your position may be eliminated. And then it said, if you choose to not continue in your current role in the federal workplace, we thank you for your blah, 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 blah. And the departure would begin effective January 28th. It's available to all federal employees until February 6th. If you resign under this program, you will retain all pay and benefits regardless of your daily workload and will be requirements until September 30th, 2025 or earlier if you choose to accelerate your resignation for any reason. So it says, whichever path you choose, we thank you for your service to the United States of America. Upon review of the below deferred resignation letter, if you wish to resign, 1, select reply to this email. You must reply from your government account. A reply from an account other than your government account will not be accepted. And 2, type the word resign into the body of this reply and hit send. And then the last day, it said, to accept the deferred resignation program is February 6th, 2025. So this is an opportunity to take this buyout of almost 8 months' pay, and there is the deferred resignation letter. Please accept this letter as my formal resignation from employment with employment, blah, 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 blah. And given my impending resignation, I understand I will be exempt from any return to office requirements pursuant to the people. Basically, you're paying them off to never come to the office again.
And
Now,
there's no guarantee on this money, nor is this action legal
exactly.
in the view of many. So
I'm laughing because it's completely absurd, as John is saying. You cannot do this. There is no money. Where is this money coming from? You're going to be paying off all these federal employees that are taking an early buyout.
Yeah. I mean, this is the absurdity. And let me say, this is not a normal presidency, nor is this a normal time. This is a president who has no compunction about violating law. And whatever you say, whether you agree with somebody in their policies or not their policies, that's legitimate discussion. But what do you do when you have a lawless administration that is putting lawless people in key government positions? Can you imagine Kash Patel as director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation or Tulsi Gabbard as the head of national intelligence? I mean, if I had written a novel and I had suggested these things in a novel, nobody would have believed it. Nobody.
It's often, James Watson says, anyone who resigns will get nothing. Well, certainly that's the track record. There's they're kind of all show and no go. You mentioned Kash Patel. I guess I'll just segue quickly because Kash Patel, who is the Trump loyalist who is nominated for the FBI head, apparently he broke national security protocol in 2020 by publicly speaking about a hostage rescue in Yemen. He did not have authorization to do it. That is something that is coming through a whistleblower report, and Democrats are pointing to this. He was a senior advisor to the acting director of national intelligence, Rick Grenell, and supposedly he inserted himself inappropriately, those are the words used in the report, in the hostage recovery mission. That was in October of 2020, and disclosed information about that to the Wall Street Journal before the hostages were confirmed in U.S. custody. That's a violation of all kinds of protocols and, arguably federal law.
It's a violation of the law.
Yeah.
But let me explain to you. You said it, and I listened very carefully, Mark, when you offer these observations. You said it. The Republicans seem to be going in lockstep. How can they confirm Tulsi Gabbard, for God's sake? Look at her record. And I gave a talk recently, and I said I don't think it'll even come to a vote because what will happen is that Trump will simply make an interim appointment. Well, I was wrong. There will be a vote, and one can only hope that she's defeated. The days when you nominated a cabinet or you put key people in positions of responsibility, that you look for consensus, that you look for bipartisan support. Pete Hegseth, you just talked about that. I sat marveling at the fact that J.D. Vance was called on to break a tie in the United States Senate. And of course, he voted with the nominee. Do you remember Alan Drury's wonderful book, Advise and Consent? I tell people, read the book or still better, watch the movie. And you understand the machinations that go on and the blackmail that goes on in terms of votes. So all of these things disturb me greatly. And I am really worried. One last comment. I know we've got limited time, but I just want to say this. I had a huge argument the other night with someone I'm very close to about this, who said, well, even if you're right about everything, the government itself will hold, the Constitution will hold. And my answer was, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. But I don't have faith in the Supreme Court. And because I don't have faith in the Supreme Court and I don't have faith in the Republicans, there is no check, no balance. And the only thing you can hope is that the arrogance of power will ultimately reveal that the king has no clothes. My podcast this morning, by the way, had to do with the fact that he's not a king, he's a president, and there's a big difference.
I'll give you the good news, which I think is related to the last thing you said. He may overreach, and it appears that he's overreaching, and the Project 2025 guys are overreaching early. And, you know, I don't blame them in a way for trying to spend the political currency that Trump has. He has a lot of political currency right now, early on, while you still have it. But the bad news is, to John's point, that he may overreach to the point that you lose the public and you begin to have a stink on these EOs that he is signing and all of the other agenda items that he may get to. So we will see. But now let me give you the bad news, and this is, I think, where you and I generally part company. But it was interesting to hear what you said to your friend, because maybe you're coming over to my side. I don't have faith in the American institutions. I don't believe that this sort of blind faith in institutions in America gets you anywhere. Institutions in America are made of who? People. Made up of people who uphold the values of those institutions. You've talked about it in these conversations that we've had repeatedly and on your own podcast. The reality is that without people who have backbones, have pushback, have an allegiance and adherence to values, without that, the institution is empty. And
you get a Robert Kennedy. You get a Robert Kennedy as Health and Human Services. I mean, I don't want to say you're right, but I do want to say that you are correct emphatically in the fact that you have to have good people around you. You have to have watch persons who really pay attention.
Yeah,
and,
you need to watch the watchers. And the inspectors general being dismissed as they were, these are efforts being made, and there is an expressed strategy. And again, we've talked about it before. It's laid out in Project 2025 to get rid of these impediments, like the inspectors general, to so much of what they want to do.
And the Trump people admit it. They admit it. They believe in a unitary presidency, that the president is the dominant figure. Well, I can only tell you, having worked for Richard Nixon, thank God we had checks and balances in those days. Evidently,
I think Nixon today would survive without too much trouble.
Can I make one other comment? I know you limit my time. I'm very angry at you for that, by the way, but I'll still support the show.
Whoever is producing this thing has no idea what they're doing.
Right, let John produce it. Go ahead.
Did you listen to the press statement yesterday about how they're going to expand the number of people who are going to be able to ask questions in the White House press office? And what they're talking about is having flacks, right-wing flacks.
Yes.
I
From alternative media is what they're calling it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just terrible.
The goal is to delete our government and replace it with a CEO dictator, says Cousin Erie. Thanks for the $6 super chat. It is true. That speaks to what you're talking about, the unitary executive. You want the power of the executive. Look at this. Katie Lynch says, John Rothmann forever. Where is that? John Rothmann forever. Yeah.
I appreciate it. And really and truly, sometimes I feel like I am a voice crying out in the wilderness. If I told you the amount of criticism I take for my comments in public discourse and in my podcast, but I really believe that we are doing a public service, and I commend you, Mark, for continuing this podcast. And more than that, I urge people to support the Mark Thompson program. It is so vital, and the more we can do this, the better off we are, in my judgment. And God help us if we don't have that free media. I must say, I regret that we don't have KGO anymore, because can you imagine if we were on the radio 5 days a week, what we would have been able to do? But even that is taken away from us.
Well,
but
I don't miss the Cars for Kids commercials, John. I will tell you that. And I also don't miss was it New Balance? What was the vitamin thing that they used to always run?
I know.
Those commercials. Yes, I've been taking New Balance for the last 90 days, and I feel young again.
Yeah.
I don't miss those commercials.
They asked
honestly.
me if I would do them, and I said no.
But I do. Thank you, Dara. Just subscribed to the show. Thank you, Dara. Dara Kinsey, my new favorite subscriber, and I appreciate that. I also encourage you to support this show. We are publicly funded through Patreon and PayPal.
Can you
and
put that back up?
Both.
He had the way to contribute.
Can you put there it is. Want to support the show? Visit themarkthompsonshow.com. Click Patreon or PayPal links to contribute, be part of the community that keeps this show running, which is really cool. And John, we this is interesting. I didn't hear your view on this. TM is saying, hey John, was it a Nazi salute? Musk and the Anti-Defamation League, I'm guessing, is going to say it, John. They didn't. That was a weird thing, John. What was your take on that?
Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, called it disgusting. Not only did he do the Nazi salute twice, but let me be clear, he does suffer from Asperger's, and it may simply have been a reflex. But then to speak to the far-right political party in Germany and tell them we have to put aside what the grandparents and the parents did, enough of this guilt, was so abhorrent. And he did it on the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
Yeah, the timing was pretty awful.
My mind is boggled. Yeah. And may I say, I speak now as a Jew. I was the chairman for a quarter of a century of the Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance, here in San Francisco. No one is disciplining Elon Musk. Have you heard a statement from the White House condemning his comments? We have to wait for the Chancellor of Germany to make a statement, and I'm glad he did.
Well, John, they're good people on both sides. All right, Marilyn G. with the $1.99. Thank you for being there. I, too, miss KGO. And one of the things I miss is my Johnny Rothman. Come on. We love our time with you, pal. Thank you for
Anytime.
Around the Political World with John Rothman is his daily podcast. Check him out, support him, and enjoy him here on Wednesdays. Yes, sir.
The Voice of San Francisco. You go to the podcast link, and I talk about local San Francisco politics as we close. Next week, I believe, Daniel Lurie, the new mayor of San Francisco, is going to be testifying before Congress. Jim Comer is calling him in to talk about sanctuary cities. We haven't talked about what is going on with that, but I know our time is limited. I want to thank you, Mark Thompson, for my psychiatric session each week, for which I don't have to pay a thing, and I'm not paid a thing. But anyway.
We love our time with you as well. It helps us psychologically also.
Anytime.
There it is. Advise and Consent, the movie. Otto Preminger. It's a Henry Fonda film. It's a classic movie. Walter Pidgeon, Charles Lawton. Wow. Look at Tony.
About advising and consenting. And that is what makes it so interesting. It really gives an image, and it's free online, I believe. That's how I watched it. But
I mean, you couldn't even pitch a movie like that today unless something blows up or whatever. You couldn't, it would not exist in the Marvel universe. But anyway.
By the way, you know that film was filmed with permission in the Senate chamber itself.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So if you watch it and it's in color, you can see what the Senate actually looks like. And that was done. It was marvelous. In any case,
it was directed by Otto Preminger, and John does look a little Otto Preminger-y, if I can just say, in this shot. Come on, John, you and Otto. Get me a picture of Otto Preminger real quick, Tony. Otto Preminger, Ottopreminger. Otto Preminger, he was a famous director. He directed that movie that John's so crazy about, Advise and Consent, and you put it right up against Rothman, and he looks kind of like John Rothman. With the dome
yes,
going.
I know. With
yeah,
nothing,
the power. You've got a power dome. Look at that. There he is. That is, yes. Very impressive, sir. All right, John, we love you. Stay in touch. Yeah, there. Thank you. Better shot. Look at that. That is Kim, is that not Rothman right there? Kim is.
I see the similarity. I do
Yes,
see the
all right.
similarity.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
The happy smile, the shiny head.
Thank you. The happy smile and shiny
Yeah.
head.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah,
Glint of
very, very
intelligence in the
impressive.
eyes. Yes.
Yes. Intelligent. He was a brilliant director.
Just
and,
keep the compliments coming. I look
Rothmann
forward
is
to next week, and anytime you need me, just call.
Okay. Thanks, pal. John Rothmann, everybody.
Do you feel it? It's the Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
We are here for you live every day, Monday through Friday. It is a 2-hour show. We start at 11 o'clock on the West Coast. We start at 2 o'clock on the East Coast, and we go until 1 o'clock on 1 o'clock-ish. Sometimes go a little over. And at 4 o'clock-ish on the East Coast, sometimes we go over there as well. And wherever you are, we appreciate your support. I saw that somebody was weighing in from Europe today, which is always interesting to me because I feel the European experience is somehow maybe informed by having seen a lot of European history, and they learn more about European history. There's a certain, which has been punctuated by periods of despotism and fascism and the rise of despotic power through all of these different individual European countries that have to kind of play nice with each other on one level, but sometimes they could be thrown in an adversarial position. In Europe, I'm talking about. And then you find, I think in European history, many examples of the people pushing back, which is also instructive. So this country, we have a strong myth of American exceptionalism. We're all taught that, America's the best and what we do and our laws and our sense of propriety and life is better than anything else in the world. I always love we just finished this, so you heard over and over and over again. We have the peaceful transfer of power. It's the thing that distinguishes us from the rest of the world. The peaceful transfer of power. Hey guys, America, you're not the only country that has a peaceful transfer of power. I mean, read a paper, okay? There's a peaceful transfer of power in Britain, in Germany, in France, in Italy. I can go on and on and on and on. So Americans, we have to take our place at the table, and in some ways, it's most wonderful and oversized, but we also have to deal with some basic historical realities. We're not the only country that has freedoms. And I am seeing many of these freedoms that we're so proud of being rolled back. Tomorrow on the show, Greg Palast joins us. Greg Palast is the distinguished investigative reporter. He's done more brilliant reporting about our government and the vote than any other investigative reporter I can think of. I mean, he really does stay with the question of voter suppression. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about the results of this last election. This last election was not marked by legitimacy. This last election was influenced by maybe two things, maybe more than two, but at minimum two. One is massive voter suppression. And when I say voter suppression, it can, there it is, Ray Ryan, Mark, I'm from London, and I promise you under Johnson, and now Farage, we are going the same way as you guys. Yeah, now, it's true that, let me be, well, I hate to digress, but let me just respond to that comment. And then I will double back to the Palace stuff, but he'll be on tomorrow. Just for those who are just passing through, he'll be a great guest. I really want you to check him out. He's the ballot bomb, exactly. Thank you, Tammy. When I say there's a peaceful transfer of power in Europe and in other countries, it is true, and it's also true that there is a rise of authoritarianism across Europe. There's no question about it. Right-wing parties are growing in strength from Germany, which you really, I think it's a place you really didn't expect to see it as soon as it may be manifesting itself. France is another great example. I mean, the authoritarian party, the right-wing, extreme right-wing party, has way more oxygen you'd think that they would get, and it goes on and on. So believe me, we watch that with interest. It is not just here in this country that we're seeing a rise of a powerful, figure who is trying to take on as much power as he can. Back to the election, again, voter suppression takes on many different forms. It can be eliminating ballot boxes where you can drop boxes. They are doing that across the South. They've done it, and they've done it successfully. So the fewer ballot drop boxes there are, the fewer places you can vote. The fewer places if you have to get from here to there, and there is far away, it has a chilling effect on the vote. So that's a small thing. Also, the number of live polling places, that was reduced. Now, these are all voter suppression things that we talked about on the show. But what I'm talking about with Greg Palast is the removal of votes and voters from the voter rolls. The elimination of votes. Well, how many of those could there be? Over 3 million. Over 3 million. Join us tomorrow. Greg and I will talk about this and review it. It's astounding. And if you haven't seen it, you should see the movie Vigilantes, Inc. And you will see for yourself so much of what was done and is being done. So that's tomorrow on this show. Anything else I need to get to before Kim's news? Jim Slayton is saying for $4.99 Super Chat, and thank you for that, because I've just been informed that as a result of us using that music earlier, we may be demonetized today. So I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that that Jim has stepped up alongside many of you to throw in super stickers and super chats. Jim Slayton with a $4.99 Super Chat says, as each day goes by, I'm finding it harder for me to follow my processes, protocols, and standards. I mean, it is an effort, always.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
We do have them, and we try to honor our processes, protocols, and standards, even as I understand it is a difficult thing. So thank you, Jim. You are an OG of this show. Oakland DB says, does anyone really believe these hearings matter these days? Pre-planned dramatics with VP to break tie. Oakland DB, you, of course, are right. Thank you for the $5 Super Chat. I would say two things. One is a lot of things can be broken down to two things I've noticed today. I had the other thing broken down to two things, and I have two things here. And here is what I would say. Of course, you're right that there's a performative aspect to these hearings. I wish, in a way, they weren't televised, because the televised aspect creates a grandstanding that is just obnoxious and obviously serves no purpose. But there is also some light in addition to the heat, and some of what we shared with you in the first hour, I think, speaks to some of the things that the public can be reminded of. But now to your last point, which is the vice president breaks the tie. You're right. It all is votes. So in the end, Oakland, you're right. It's just about the votes. But I'd suggest even in these largely performative hearings, oftentimes, there are moments that really matter, and where you really can get some information or reminders of information that's out there. I think we saw a little bit of that. Everything else I think I got to. So with that said, I'll put any other comments aside until after Kim's news. So Kim,
yes,
are you ready for some news? Okay.
Always.
All right. Kim gets us posted on news, and I do have the Coachella Valley Coffee.
The news is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee.
This is the We Could Try Ignoring It, Sir mug, which I do love.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
I do love this mug. It's one of the new mugs. They're white ones. You can see the black ones behind me. They are old school mugs. If you got one of those, collector's item. So hang on to it. Probably will be. These are the new white mugs. And there are new processes, protocols, and standards being applied to the merch. We may be going with...
We have processes and protocols and standards.
I'm having Courtney come on. She's the queen of merch to describe what will happen. But I think in the meantime, you want to get one of these mugs if you can.
White ones are short-lived, huh?
The white ones, or at least, But again, I love the phrases, we could
try ignoring it, sir.
I do love that. We could try ignoring it, sir. And so it sits over here. Kim's news, and we continue. Also, Belinda is joining us with It's the Planet Stupid. It's our day to talk about what's happening to planet Earth. This just in, Not so great. Kim's News, and we continue. Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. As mentioned, this report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. President Trump is signing the Laken-Riley Act into law. It allows for the detention of illegal immigrants, they say, who are accused of theft and violent crimes. Speaking from the White House, Trump talked about the Georgia nursing student who was murdered just over a year ago by an undocumented immigrant, calling her unbelievable. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s first confirmation hearing is over. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services faced some pretty tough questions about his views on vaccines, also on abortion. Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden went back and forth with Kennedy over his stance on the measles vaccine. He pushed back, Kennedy did, against claims that he wants to ban certain food as well as vaccines. Kennedy was interrupted at least twice by protesters in the gallery as he spoke.
I intended to talk about the Samoa experiment.
Yeah.
I didn't get to it yesterday. I meant to.
Children died.
But essentially, Kennedy was behind an effort to blind. It was almost as though there would be a built-in blind study of the efficacy and safety of the measles vaccine because so many people in Samoa were not getting the measles vaccine. It's a kind of a more complicated story, and I really wanted to share it yesterday, but it is really a blemish on RFK Jr. I mean, a despicable blemish on his history.
He promoted his anti-vaccine stance there. They bought it, and their children died because of it.
That is a better summary than the one I just gave. Yes, that's exactly right, Kim. Thank you.
The Federal Reserve is leaving interest rates unchanged. It comes as the Fed weighs how the Trump administration's economic agenda might impact inflation and the economy as a whole. Again, after the meeting today, the interest rate unchanged. The Trump administration is looking to pay out federal workers who don't want to return to the office to quit their jobs. The deferred resignation would include a severance package of about 8 months' pay plus benefits. The administration says it expects 5 to 10% of the federal workforce to up and quit. We'll see how that goes. By the way, they say if you don't quit and take the payout, then you roll the dice and take your chances that you'll still have a job after that.
Take what payout? Where's the money? You've got to go through Congress on this stuff. You cannot freeze money and you cannot pay out money without the approval of Congress. Now, that you may get that because you're such a powerful guy, Donald Trump, again, you pretty much get whatever you want, but you cannot just issue a memo saying that,
what?
Yeah, Constitution what?
President Trump is appealing his New York hush money criminal conviction. The president's lawyers submitted an appeal Tuesday, officially beginning the process in his 34-count felony conviction. One lawyer said in a statement, Trump was targeted, which sets a dangerous precedent. A New York jury, of course, found Trump guilty in May for falsifying business records to cover up a $130,000 hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. The White House says President Trump's executive order freezing federal aid funding remains in full effect. Earlier today, the White House rescinded the memo issued about the freeze. In a post on X, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt said it is simply a rescission of the OMB memo to end any confusion created by the court's injunction. The order was temporarily paused by a federal judge on Tuesday, possibly because of the illegalities Mark just mentioned moments ago. Hamas is set to release 3 Israeli hostages tomorrow. This is part of a phase 1 of the ceasefire and hostage deal, with 2 rounds of releases having already taken place. 5 Thai nationals also expected to be freed as part of this exchange. Monday, Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer said 8 of the remaining Israeli hostages that are set to be released are dead. So, not the exact outcome that everyone was hoping for. President Trump's latest executive order will ban access to gender-affirming health care for anyone younger than the age of 19. The president signing the order yesterday, which says the United States will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support anyone younger than 19 from transitioning Every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for transgender adults and minors. The order will not block gender-affirming care for non-transgender kids like cosmetic surgeries or hormonal medications. The Justice Department is now looking to abandon the case against two Mar-a-Lago workers that were involved in the president's classified documents case. In a court filing, the DOJ looking to dismiss an appeal that looked to revive prosecution of Trump's valet, Walt Nauta, and Mar-a-Lago club worker Carlos de Oliveira. They were accused of helping Trump hide classified documents from officials that were looking for them.
Well, there's no question they did it. They talked about the fact in depositions that they were told to move boxes. One case, it was to move boxes into an SUV. In another case, it was move these boxes to different parts of Mar-a-Lago. I mean, this to me, as those who have watched the show before are well aware, was the most straightforward case. And it's really sad that it wasn't, had they tried the case in Washington, D.C., which is where all these documents were jacked from, they would have won it. It was a slam dunk. Instead, you got this concierge judge down in Florida who parked the case, erased the case, made it go away. And the reason it's so straightforward and slam dunk is more than just the legal part of it. I think just from a reputational harm that might be associated with it, it was far more powerful. Why did this guy take all of these documents? I mean, I think they number almost 2,000. They are oftentimes top secret military documents, classified, and put them in bathrooms, ballrooms, bedrooms, and offices at Mar-a-Lago, completely unsecured. There is no justification for it. And for that reason, I felt it was a very powerful thing to have in the face of Donald Trump. And that's leaving aside what we're seeing with this Nauta and the other guy who were part of the effort to conceal the fact that Trump had stolen these documents and wasn't returning all of them. Okay, so
running them from room to room with like the Benny Hill theme in the background.
Thank you. I mean, it was utterly ridiculous. So that all would have been played out far more prominently in a court case had the case been brought in Washington, D.C. Instead, it was erased by, as I say, the Judge Cannon in Florida, who's playing for the next move. She might even end up on the Supreme Court. And then this case gets erased, and so these guys, of course, the DOJ is just going to drop the case against these two as well. It's no surprise.
Several Southern California cities are concerned about their backyard being used as a dumping ground to process hazardous debris from the deadly Eaton fire. The cities of Duarte, Azusa, Irwindale, and Baldwin Park are opposing federal plans to use Lario Park as a site to process the hazardous household debris from the fire. The EPA has already prepared the site, though, with safety measures, and they say they'll be monitoring air quality in that area. But the four cities are not happy that they were not alerted to this plan at first so that they could weigh in on the site's potential environmental impact and proximity to residents as well.
So there are a couple of things being played out in these moving of debris issues, debris that is plentiful from the aftermath of these fires. You have communities that are already decimated by the fire damage, and they're feeling as though we should get a place at the table when it comes to discussing what's going to happen with disposing of these toxic materials. But at the same time, that's coexisting with, we got to get this done quickly because these toxic materials are super toxic. They're super bad for you, and they're streaming into the environment, right? We need to wrap them up and get them out. And so the EPA made this decision super quickly, and they essentially got the plan in place, and these communities feel as though, hey, we didn't even get a chance to weigh in on this. But you see the tug of war, because on the one hand, they want to get it done quickly, and if they have everybody weigh in and, you know, a series of meetings and conversations and political back and forth, they're not going to get it done quickly. And yet, you know, if they don't do these kinds of open forum meetings, they get the sort of controversy that's built up around it now. But either way, they got to wrap this stuff up, and they've got to get it done. I mean, they've got to transport it overnight on freeways, and that's another thing. Where do they take it on side streets? No, people don't want that. Well, they've designated certain freeways. People don't want that either. So this is a really difficult situation. I suspect it's not going to be satisfactory to any of the parties involved, but it continues.
San Francisco city workers are wondering They're going to have to go back to the office soon. So, new mayor Daniel Lurie didn't speak directly about the issue during his inauguration speech, but he did say he'd like to entice people to come back in person. Mayor Lurie says he wants to make people want to come back into the downtown area to work with their friends and family. A lot of businesses closed in San Francisco because the workers just never really came back. About 30% of San Francisco city employees spend part of their time at the office and part of their time working remotely. Mayor Lurie said he wants to look at every city's department operational setup to make sure the public is being well served. At least 30 people are dead, dozens more injured after a stampede in India. It happened at one of the world's biggest gatherings at the Ma Kumbh Mela, which happens every 12 years. An estimated 100 million people gather to bathe in the holy river waters of the Ganges. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi calling the incident extremely sad.
Did you hear that, everyone? 100 million people.
It's the world's largest religious gathering. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what happens when you get that many people in one place? This.
Yeah, I mean, stampedes. People want to bathe. They've been, in the Ganges River is this, and I guess in this holy rite and holy ritual.
Yeah. A Philadelphia Eagles fan is dead after falling from a light pole while celebrating the team's NFC Championship victory on Sunday. Video shows 18-year-old Temple University student Tyler Sabathy falling onto his back and hitting his head on the concrete sidewalk. He was hospitalized with a brain injury before he passed away 2 days later. Sabathy was a Toronto native, also a member of the Temple's club's gymnastics team. He has passed away during that celebration. Thursday night, a huge opportunity, by the way, to help support recovery efforts for the wildfires in Southern California. Good night for music fans, too. The iHeartRadio Fire Aid Benefit Concert is tomorrow night at Intuit Dome and Kia Forum. Both are in Inglewood. The ticket's $99, and every dollar raised goes towards short-term relief efforts and long-term initiatives for fire prevention. You can check it out at fireaidla.org. fireaidla.org. The Chinese New Year begins tomorrow, or today, rather, as mentioned, and it is the year of the snake being ushered in.
What?
The Lunar New Year is an annual 15-day celebration observed by upwards of 1 billion people around the globe. The year of the snake symbolizes the sixth animal in the Chinese zodiac cycle. It is associated with character traits like wisdom, intuition, and charm. People born under this sign are typically believed to be intelligent, perceptive, and graceful.
Oh.
The Mona Lisa.
So that's only if you're born. If you're born in this month, you're saying, then you'd be, or in this year,
in this cycle. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In this cycle, right? It's a series of cycles. Thank you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Got to be up on your Chinese New Year lingo.
Yeah, I got.
I feel like you're acting very unprofessional right now.
Well, I just didn't know the one. I didn't know the one thing. That's all.
Yeah,
I just want to be clear. I get clarity on that.
The Mona Lisa is getting a room of her own. Finally, Leonardo da Vinci's painting will get its own special exhibition space as part of a Louvre renovation in Paris. The French President Emmanuel Macron announcing the renovation project yesterday, saying the museum will be redesigned, restored, and expanded. Comes after the famous art museum said its buildings were starting to deteriorate and overcrowding was starting to have a negative impact.
When you see the Mona Lisa in person, everyone, have you seen the Mona Lisa in person, Kim?
I haven't, but I heard it's tiny.
That's the thing that you're struck by. It's not. It's not. It has an oversized quality in our minds, right? Because we talk about it so much.
Right.
But it's actually not very big. No, it's not. I think they should. It's been through a lot of. It's been through the.
Thank God it's under glass.
Yes, and now it's going to have its own room.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lastly, the Grammys are adding more performers to this weekend's ceremony.
Look at that crush around the Mona Lisa. I don't mean to interrupt, but if you're watching on YouTube, look at that crush of people. I mean,
if you're in the back, you can't see it.
It looks like that Ganges religious thing. There's so many people pressing. Wow.
It does.
Yeah, if you're at the back, you can't. And everybody's taking a picture with their, they're taking a smaller picture.
A lot of selfies.
A lot of selfies. See the guy in the middle, Tony? The guy in the middle with the
Yep, he's taking a selfie of himself.
He's right up front. That's what you want with the selfie. You want to be right up front.
Good
you
for him.
and the Mona. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. So the Recording Academy announcing Stevie Wonder, Lainey Wilson, Coldplay's Chris Martin, and St. Vincent's are among the acts added to the Grammys. Others include Brad Paisley, Janelle Monáe, John Legend, and Sheryl Crow. So the Grammys, of course.
Wow.
That's
fantastic. It is pretty good.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
I have my Coachella Valley tea today. The vanilla.
Oh, yes, you do.
Just a hint of vanilla. I love it. You love the coffee. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. But even if they weren't sponsoring the news, I'd still be drinking my Coachella Valley tea. It's that good. And we've got a discount for you. If you go and to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, check around the website, and then you find that you'd like to purchase something, make sure that you enter our special exclusive code at checkout. It is Mark T all together. Mark T. You get 10% off just for listening to the Mark Thompson Show and buying a little something from CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And thank you for supporting those that support us.
Oh, yeah. Very well said.
Yeah.
Don't forget the discount code Mark T. It's all one. No spaces. At CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Kim McAllister of the Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, Mark. It's George Santos here. A lot of people are telling me you're a liar.
That's pure speculation.
What's a little lie between friends?
Morning.
We're in better shape, but I don't think we're in wildly better shape.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
This is a word from the Lord, and he is not happy.
Good day, sir.
Seriously, what the
Why are you yelling?
Yeah, I know. It's great to have everybody here. We're a live show, 11 to 1 on the West Coast, 2 to 4 on the East Coast, and it's really great to have everyone be able to join live in the chat. But if you're not watching live, it's really cool to read comments. We try to read all comments, respond when possible as we drop the videos. Belinda Waymouth with It's the Planet Stupid starting in just moments. I wanted to mention to you, because it is making big news, that this buyout of federal employees, which, as you know, I think is ridiculous, simply because, you cannot do something like this without congressional approval. You don't have the money, and there's just not the mechanism in place. But that doesn't seem to be stopping this administration. The federal government employing more than 3 million people as of November of last year. That's about 1.9% of the nation's entire civilian workforce. And the average tenure for a federal employee is, anybody? What's the average tenure for a federal employee? I'll give you the answer in 3, 2, 1, nearly 12 years. So most people who are in the Fed system serve for about a dozen years. So even a fraction of the workforce taking these buyouts could send shockwaves through the economy, widespread disruptions throughout society as a whole. There'd be wide-ranging implications for delivery, timeliness, effectiveness of federal services, as noted, across the country. So the frontline health workers, the Veterans Affairs Department, officials who process loans for home buyers, small businesses who are involved with the federal government helping to support that small business, contractors who help get the next generation of military weaponry. All of these things would be affected by this. And it is so immensely disruptive to just offer across the board this kind of buyout. It's what he did, Trump, with the pardons. Just pardon all of them. There's a real difference between everything and everyone that was involved in the January 6th case. Similarly, there's a real difference between federal employees, their responsibilities, and where they work. So The American Federation of Government Employees, that's a union, their president, Everett Kelly, said it shouldn't be viewed as a voluntary buyout. It should be viewed as pressuring workers who are not considered loyal to the new administration to vacate their jobs. This is the quote: "Purging the federal government of dedicated career federal employees will have vast unintended consequences that will cause chaos for the Americans who depend on a functioning federal government. Between the flurry of anti-worker executive orders and policies, it is clear that the Trump administration's goal is to turn the federal government into a toxic environment where workers cannot stay even if they want to." The story is to be continued, but in addition to the questionable legality, the reality is the repercussions would be massive. This is a classic reckless move, chaotic move on the part of this new administration. And the Trump regime is, frankly, one of their cornerstones is this kind of thing. Things that are done reflexively without consideration as to the actual effect. But remember, they're not friends of government to begin with. So when you talk about government employees and government systems, they don't want any of it. They view the government as an impediment to executive power. So, Depressed Canadian with a $10 super chat says, "Yesterday, David K. Johnson said, 'Let Trump be Trump,' to develop an opposition. But the public already knew what he was capable of and voted for him anyway. I hope the fever breaks, but it's doubtful." I agree that there's a sense that, let everything go sideways and just, be there when we're sweeping up the mess. I think that's dangerous. But I understand where it comes from. Just saying, I think it's tricky. Anyway, that's what's happening at the federal level. And right now, the Trump regime is in charge. The Trump administration controls it. And the last thing I'll just mention to you before I bring on Belinda is that 85% of Greenlanders don't want the Trump takeover, according to a new poll.
I'm surprised that number isn't higher.
Survey is saying that 85% don't want it as the Danish prime minister tours Europe to try to shore up support for keeping the Arctic island out of the clutches of the Americans.
That means 15% are all for it? Is that what that means?
Or they're sort of like, nah, whatever, we don't care. We don't want to be Danes. We don't want to be Americans. We want to be Greenlanders, said the Prime Minister of Greenland. The acquisition of Greenland is still being talked about. They were a colony before being a Danish territory, and we'll have to see where it all shakes out. But I'm putting that in the long shot category for ever happening. John Anchor, thank you for a $10 super sticker, my friend.
Big shout out.
We're a crowd-funded show, so I like to make a big deal out of the part of the crowd that funds. John, thank you for the $2 super sticker.
Big shout out.
And I've been promising my orgy of thanks, which will come in the next 7 days. I will have an orgy of thanks on this show for all the new PayPal and Patreon subscribers. So if you love orgies, you'll really love the orgy of thanks. So.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
I love Wednesdays. Wednesdays bring us into a conversation about the planet and its challenges, the world, the environment, policy, nature. We do it in a segment we call It's the Planet, Stupid.
The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet.
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet, stupid. No, it's the planet, stupid.
Our guide through the many issues and challenges the planet faces. Belinda Waymouth is here, eco-journalist. Usually with some good news, punctuated by some lesser news. But what do you have for us today?
Okay.
Well, I think the most exciting thing that's happening is what's going on with EVs, electric vehicles. GM has become the biggest seller of EVs. It's overtaken Tesla in the US, was announced this week. It has 9 EV models as opposed to Tesla's 5, ranging in price from the low 30,000s up to 58,000. And GM is being super duper smart about this. They're going to copy what China does with batteries. They've already got a guy called Kurt Kelty who used to work for Tesla. He's a battery expert because they know that the way that you make Teslas profitable, or the way that you make, listen to me, I use Teslas like that was EVs, EVs profitable, the battery is a huge component of it. And what GM is going to do is, rather than importing battery parts from China, which they have to come all the way across the ocean, they're going to be produced by a South Korean company based in Tennessee. And so they're going to bring the supply chain here to produce the batteries, and it's a go. It's a total go. And what's happened is, Tesla, as we know, is imploding. Their sales are way down. The Cybertruck that he had said, that Musk had said before, was on the market. He said, I've already got 250,000 orders, pre-orders for it, the Cybertruck. And, last year sold less than 40,000. And it's, been a disaster. But, one of the things that's interesting that I factoid, so 63% of potential car buyers in the US say they will not consider a Tesla. And the reasons cited are the political tomfoolery of Musk is one of the reasons, and then the Cybertruck, and then also the sort of lack of focus and, too many companies, and, the decline in Tesla sales has really been marked. But the other thing that's really amazing is, it's not just GM, and it's, as we spoke about, before on the show, like Trump is, coming in and saying, okay, gone are the mandates that people have to buy an EV as their new car, which it never was that. It was, you could buy the car of your choice. But, Biden, the goal was that, we were going to have 50% of new car sales were going to be EVs by 2030. And Trump also said, okay, we're not going to have the tailpipe emission mandates. That's nonsense. Well, this stuff is already in play. The momentum is already there. And as I described before, once, these big car manufacturers have changed their infrastructure, so they're building EVs, which are the way of the future. You can't just come in like the revolving door of whoever's in charge and change that, because the momentum is already there. The systems are already in place. We're already moving there. And it's not just GM, everyone is coming out with these cheaper EVs. So you've got, Hyundai and Kia and Honda and Volkswagen. And then last year, the Europeans at their big car show in Paris said, we're not going to be, outdone by the Chinese. We're going to have $20,000 EVs on the market by 2026.
Well, the new Chinese EVs are supposed to be amazing. You can get them, if they were being sold here at market prices for like $14,000. It's insane how affordable they are. Yeah. And apparently they're better. And I'm not just talking about like the mechanics of the way the car, the interior, the way you interact with the car. It's all supposed to be so cool and great. And as usual, China, maybe they ripped off the technology or whatever. They ripped off the idea. They ripped off the blueprints. I don't know. But all I know is that they've produced this car. It's like 14 or 15 grand, and it's supposed to be better than many of the EVs that we have in this country. But you can't get it here without the markups and all the rest, so that they make it almost impossible for you to buy one of these Chinese EVs. Yeah.
I wonder if it's the Neo ET5, because I sent you guys a story out of Norway this week. So Norway, they believe that this year, this is really interesting. So they think the new car sales this year will be between 95 to 100% electric. And by the way, in 2010, it was less than 1% of new car sales.
Wait a minute. Say that again. Say that again.
So Norway is making this huge transition to electric vehicles, and
95% of the new cars they sell in Norway.
New car sales this year are predicted to be EVs.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. And so listen to this. In 2010, it was less than 1% of EVs were the new car sales. Last year, they were at 89%. And so far in January, it's been, way up in the 90s of new car sales. And we're not even at the end of January. They're going to have a celebration party on February the 13th. They are so convinced that, that's how high their EV sales will be, that they're making this, transition. And they're sitting on oil and gas reserves like the US are. But they also see what the future is, and they've done it. They also, one of the things I have to point out, it's a small population, they're rich,
Sure.
so that's huge, but they're also bringing the prices of these cars way down. And as their experts say, it's all about the price point, like you just said, the Neo GT5, which I sent, there's a picture in the story about Norway, and it shows on the streets of Oslo, the electric vehicles are Teslas and this Chinese model, which I think is really interesting. And their buses, so those are going to all be electric by 2026. So, and it doesn't mean that there aren't oil combustion engine, cars on the road. In the whole of Norway, it's still 28% are only 28% are EVs and the rest are oil. And on the streets of Oslo right now, it's 40% of the total fleet that's being driven around are electric. But they see the writing on the wall, and they are, they've moved in this direction, and they've done it because small population, rich, no oil lobbyists to sway politicians, which is huge. And that's the thing that, we have here, because we have, so much, meddling in our government, I think, by people who shouldn't be doing it, lobbyists. Don't think that that's not an unbiased and not for Americans' benefits. But the other thing is they put in place really amazing policies. So you can drive in a bus lane. You don't have to pay so much for parking or road taxes. You can really easily charge at home. There's huge charging infrastructure all over the country. And
this is interesting on the charging infrastructure, not to interrupt, but CCS, How does Norway winterize the charging stations? There was some controversy about charging stations not being operative. I think Detroit had problems during a particularly cold winter. Maybe it was last year or the year before. Do you know, I know this is kind of a specific question, but they must have a way in which they've winterized, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just reading a story about that the other day, that this idea that EVs don't function so well in cold weather, that has been mitigated and improved upon. I don't have the specifics, I'm afraid, because
But they have done
things.
it. Yeah, they have done it clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because, and this is another thing, the anti, transition to renewable energy cohort can get very, get everyone else very caught up on, lithium, and mining for lithium is going to pollute the whole world, or they don't work in cold weather. Well, they do work in cold weather. I could address that next week a bit more. But I just think this, this news is exciting, and I think that people need to know about it, because I feel like what's happening, and what we knew would happen, is that Trump would come in and he would be blowing around a lot of hot air about all the things he was going to do. But, his hot air is actually not going to do as much damage to the climate as the hot air that's already in the atmosphere. That's already there. That's a given. But he's making all these big claims about stuff that he's going to do. But you can't sort of just come in and, turn the ocean liner, around 180 degrees and start traveling in the other direction. You just can't do that. We are making this shift to electric vehicles. We are making this shift to green energy. I mean, there's a solar plant which is going, construction is starting in New York State. The funding for it, it's an almost $1 billion solar farm, $950 million. And it will provide electricity for 120,000 homes in New York State. And it will be online because, solar is very quick for a boy to go once you get planning permission. It will be online in 2026. New York State is aiming to have 70% clean electricity by 2030. 70%. So And the other thing that I want to point out, which is important and is really part of the factor, is that all that money that Biden put into the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, earmarked for the climate, $370 billion. I think I've got that right. There's lots of facts. I mean, lots of numbers. But that is already in play. That money is already in projects. It's already committed. Those projects are being built. And again, you can't come in as a new, head honcho and just turn that around. That is happening. So I hope people are, that this is good news, that people can hear this and go, okay, we can have someone come in and, make a lot of noise about what they're going to do, but you can't actually change things overnight. And with a few executive orders, you can't change a transition that's happening, that's in play. This stuff is in play.
Yeah, the money's already been allocated, as you say, and a lot of these programs are already underway. I mean, I think that's a fair point. It's also true, and I didn't realize that New York had committed so much to that, to the solar project. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
You also had, I remember seeing you were going to mention, was it Anwar or something about the leases? This is an extraordinary.
Okay. This is a little funny.
This is really amazing because
So this is really amazing. So Anwar, absolutely, beautiful, pristine, and Trump tried to put it on the table in 2017 with his, it was called the 2017 Tax Act. And it was mandated that they had to be 2 lease sales. So we've just
for oil and gas. These are for leases for oil. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, oil
for
and
energy
gas
extraction.
drilling. Yeah. Sorry, I need. Yeah. So we just had January's happen. It happened rather ironically on January 6th. And
so it's the market open on January 6th for
on January
oil
6th for leases
for
in
energy extraction.
In Anwar. Guess how many bids there were? Guess. Come on.
Anybody? You want to guess? Anybody? The number of
zero. Nobody.
There were no bids for the congressionally mandated oil and gas lease sale for the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, known as Anwar.
Yeah. So go for it, Caribou. Go for it. Yeah, you're safer right now. And the thing that's funny with this is that the first lot of sales, which happened during the Trump administration, also a complete failure. Nothing came to pass. There were sort of, quasi bids. There were 2 bids that were made. They got canceled. So the first round also a flop.
Yeah, it makes you wonder or realize that a lot of this is performative. A lot of these announcements are to curry favor with the base, to show you the drill, baby, drill. He talks about wind energy, and we've tilled the soil a million times in terms of his complete misrepresentation of alternative energy. But it is a thing he does.
Yeah, it's a thing he does. Like I said, it's a lot of hot air. He blows around a lot of hot air, and the fact is that oil and gas companies, they're already sitting on apparently, a lot of federal land that they are not drilling on. So they don't even need Anwar. They've got all this other, all these other lands that they're already just, biding their time sitting there. But they're also, they're not moving ahead with it. So I think that's super interesting and super promising.
Interesting and instructive. I mean, as you say,
yeah, very instructive. Sorry, I don't mean to wag my finger at you like a school mom.
It's definitely a finger wag moment. I mean, there was something going on near where many of our viewers and listeners live in a place called Moss Landing in Northern California. And it's a battery plant that has caught fire. And there are a lot of these toxins and the heavy metals that are going into this Elkhorn Reserve, which is one of the largest estuaries, a lot of marine life and endangered sea otters, and a lot of species of migratory birds are there. And I just wanted to check off on the fact that we know about it. And I don't know what we can say about it except for the fact that there is an unusually high concentration of nickel, manganese, cobalt, all detected by the university's testing that went on at this Moss Landing Marine Lab. And the heavy metals were seen in soils within 2 miles of the fire. I mean, this is why these things, even when you put the fire out, the damage is done far from the actual location of the fire. And the fire burned for 5 days. There were evacuations and road closures and health concerns. So again, this is a kind. They monitor this area anyway because the estuary is monitored by geology professors and academicians. And this has been an extraordinary thing. This fire, as I say, forced evacuations and now has forced them to concede the fact that there are a lot of heavy metals and toxins in that soil, a couple of miles from the actual fire.
Yeah, yeah. This is the problem with fire. And this is the thing that, we had President Trump in California the other day sitting with Karen Bass at a table saying, let all the people back into the Pacific Palisades and let them start rebuilding today and go higher and bigger and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, this is a toxic waste dump right now. This is an area that's going to need, really intense cleanup because the damage left by fires and the heavy metals, yes. Anyone who lives up in that area, one of the good things is that they are getting rain in Northern California, and that will wash those heavy metals, deeper into the soil. But yes, they're toxins, and then they'll get in the water, and it's not good once they're in the ocean. I mean, this is the thing I'm really concerned about here. After we had our fires, and then gloriously, we had rain, as you know, Mark, and we needed it. But all I could think of was, wow, that's going to be some toxic runoff going into the Pacific Ocean, into the Santa Monica Bay.
Yeah, I mean, we already treat the ocean as an open sewer, and now you have all that runoff. It's really scary. And I'm glad you touched on something else, which I'll just, in 20 seconds or less, say. The idea somehow that you go, you know what, we got to waive all of these restrictions, we got to rebuild. No, you got to actually, if you want to rebuild with fire-resistant materials, there actually have to be regulations, restrictions, if you want to call them that, protections, I would say, on the kind of things you rebuild with, the materials you use. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here again in 10 years. I mean, this is a real problem on the rebuild. So
yeah, and also city planning. They need to think about the streets up in places like Pacific Palisades, where there were these narrow roads as the only way out, which caused, the evacuation was a shambles. It took a couple of hours to go less than 2 miles. Friends of mine who lived on Sunset Boulevard, who were trying to leave via Sunset Boulevard and get down to Mescal, it took them an hour and 45 minutes. And that's scary as you're watching, the clouds of smoke.
That's why so many people abandoned their cars. There was that, very high-profile incident in which they abandoned their cars, and ultimately, firefighters couldn't get up there. Anyway.
And I had more stuff I wanted to talk about with the ocean, but we could talk about that next week. But I think that the EV thing, I think, is exciting to know that this is happening. Prices are coming down. Availability is going up. It makes sense. And there are places where the infrastructure is being built. Charging stations, those are being built. That's not going to stop.
Yeah, and it is true that a lot of these issues that involve, I was seeing in the chat, it still takes a long time to charge in the cold weather, et cetera. I think some of these issues are being addressed. I mean, they understand that for all of us, we want it to, on some level, parallel the experience we've had with combustion engines, where you just stick the hose in and, 8 minutes later you can take off, or whatever it may be. It may be not that quick, but they certainly want to get the charging, I suggest, more expeditious. And also, they want to get the battery loads bigger. One of the reasons that Chevy's moved ahead, I saw that Silverado. You can get a Chevy Silverado truck. Mm-hmm. It's gorgeous. I mean, if you like those big trucks, I mean, I couldn't quite sell that look probably, but but the range, because it's so big, the range is over 500 miles.
Wow. Okay, that's good. That's really good.
Exactly. But that's because the battery is as big as a house, I'm sure, but it works to give that, the driver a lot of that range security, so they don't have the range anxiety that many of us other EV drivers have. Anyway, all of these things there, Tony's got a picture of it. I mean, that's a gorgeous truck. And I mean, you could fit my car in that car. You know, that's because that cab is really big, but in that huge chassis comes a battery that's also got all of that power.
Yeah, and look at it. It's a big macho truck, and Americans love big trucks. So it's not like you're going to have to sacrifice having a big vehicle, and then also you have this big range on it. I mean, GM's cheapest EV is going to have a 300-mile range.
Yeah,
so
there is
and I just have to say one thing that's really kind of wild about GM. GM is the company that infamously in 2002 killed the electric car. Remember, they had that small electric car in 2002, and they got all the people who owned them to give them back, and they took them out and crushed them in the desert. And they are now leading, to have taken first place in front of Tesla with sales, and that's in a space of 23 years.
There's
so
a great documentary about what Belinda's talking about, how
killed the electric car
that you're seeing, how that was introduced. It was revolutionary. And how they ended it. They ended it without really explaining it. No one really owned them. They only leased them, so they took them all back. It's a great documentary. Those people who were driving them felt very attached to that technology and those cars. And it was really kind of a bit of heartbreak when all the cars were taken and then just crushed. And then you're right, the irony that Chevy would be stepping forward and leading the field as they're trying to leapfrog everybody else in the field, all the other companies that are in the EV world. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you reminded me of that.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah. And we just got from Nancy. So the Silverado battery, she's saying, can provide battery backup for your home if there's a power outage.
Oh, that's wild.
So this is the thing also. It's going to be, they call it smart technology, where all your devices speak to each other and help each other out, And the future is coming, guys. The future is coming, and it's here. It's here. So
I think
we're not going back. We're not going back.
The name of the documentary, I think, is right. Phineas, I think it's Who Killed the Electric Car. I think that is the name of the documentary, and it's really good. You should check it out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we've left more that we haven't gotten to, and I'll look forward to our next visit next Wednesday. If you want to reach Belinda, you can reach her across social media at Belinda Waymouth, Waymouth. She's on Instagram. She's on X. Are you on Blue Sky also?
I think I better move to Blue Sky because I have stopped posting on X. It says, little protest on my behalf. So I'll go to Blue Sky so that all the things I'm referencing, our listeners can go read about them in more depth.
Good.
Read
so
about
when
the
you
government
get that
talking
address,
about the failure of Anwar.
Yeah, we'll post it. That Anwar
sales.
thing is amazing. Never would have thought of it. Belinda Waymouth, everybody. Thanks, Belinda. It's The Planet Stupid for today.
More.
It's the planet stupid. No. It's the planet stupid.
Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
The
Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, we're sort of winding down. We kind of have to. I hate that wind down. But sadly, you got to wind down. Just happens. Phoenix ties the record in 1972 for consecutive days without rain as we meet. 160 days since it rained at the National Weather Service site at the airport. And the forecast is dry, says Peter Newton, who is our Phoenix correspondent. No fun. It's serious, man. It's really serious. Talk about the Southwest a lot and the challenges they're going to face and do face. So thanks for that. On the Ganges River and the crush of 100 million people that killed. How many died in that crush of people?
At least 30.
A super spreader event, says Heather. Well, I think super spreader event was the least of their worries. It is outdoors, so to be fair, maybe not the super spreader event that it might be otherwise. The Ganges River is a sewer, says Beth Farmer.
Eek. Well,
I'm sure it's not what it used to be. I would agree with that. And Blue Spark says, I hope they had porta potties. Yes, well, I mean, it's nice that our audience thinks in terms of practical consideration. I'm sure there were some strategies laid out ahead of time. Might be because they were expecting a pretty big crowd. Kim?
Yes.
I ask you, do you have anything more?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Kim, how are you?
All right, go ahead. Real
I
quick.
just saw this article that Trump is asking Elon Musk to go. You remember of course you remember the 2 astronauts that have been stranded on the International Space Station? Sunny.
Oh, sure. Yeah, they got to go
we had the
rescue
whole
them.
Sunny flap. Yeah. So Trump is now asking Musk to go rescue them right immediately because which I think they were planning on doing that anyway. Musk was,
exactly.
right?
Whenever there's something that's going to be happening anyway, Trump likes to go up there and go, yeah, I've ordered it to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he said he's asking Musk to please go rescue these astronauts that the Biden administration left stranded in space.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
That's
right.
the newest. Yeah.
I've ordered the sun to rise tomorrow, 6:11. It better get it done by 6:11 a.m. Otherwise, there'll be hell to pay.
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, my God. Well, I'm on the side of rescuing astronauts any way you can. It is truly the Gilligan's Island trip of astronauts. They went up there for it was supposed to be maybe 3 to maybe 8 days, I think. It's turned into, 8 months longer? But they did know there was a possibility of that. I like to wind down with the Why Are You Yelling Red? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very Why are you yelling?
I do love the Why Are You Yelling Red myself.
Bring it.
Thank you, Luis. Luis, our Southern California correspondent. Well, tomorrow, as I mentioned, Greg Palast and the truth about the 2024 election. Unbelievable what you're going to learn.
Are you sure Greg Palast is tomorrow? Because I thought he was in February.
Oh.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the
I don't
Mark
think you're
Johnson
right.
Show.
I might be wrong.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
JL
I'll
Coven
definitely
tomorrow,
check
though.
on it.
David Katz.
The Gavin Melania kiss. Thank you, Franco, and thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.